Welcome to the Tomorrow Cities Decision Support Environment TCDSE course. In this video, we will discuss what Module 2 under the TCDSE covers in terms of learning how we develop visioning scenarios. Before we go into the Module 2, let us talk about the Tomorrow Cities Decision Support Environment. It is a flexible framework to support inclusive and evidence-based decision for urban development, leading to a low disaster risk and more equitable future. In the first step, under future visioning, the community forecasts the potential future of the city by discussing and developing plans for urban development. Then, technical experts detail these visions in the second phase into refined visioning scenarios that have a stronger quantitative and spatial foundation. These visions detail the land use zones, including location of houses, roads, and critical infrastructures such as hospitals, schools, and industries, incorporating community aspirations. This module is based on this very stage of tomorrow's cities. In the third step of impact assessment, experts and scientists calculate the impact of natural hazards, also incorporating the effects of climate change. Using a sophisticated computer-based approach, they determine the potential human, physical, social, and economic damage these hazards may cause. In the fourth phase, the impact results presented in familiar metrics are shared with stakeholders for discussions on mitigation policies, implementation challenges, and adjustments to the urban plan to minimize disaster risk. In Tomorrow's Cities, these components were integrated using a dedicated computational platform developed as part of the project. This module has been prepared under the leadership of NSET Capacity Strengthening Team with the support from the national and international team of Tomorrow's Cities. The course is targeted primarily to a technical audience working in all sectors like the government, academia, the private sector, and the non-governmental sector such as urban planners, architects, engineers, GIS experts, etc. So what is visioning scenario development? Visioning scenario development is a process of studying underlying factors such as physical infrastructures, economy, social status, etc., and developing a collectively aspired, disaster-resilient, and pro-poor future exposure maps. The developed scenario is generally envisioned with a 30-year of horizon. The overall process of visioning scenario development is based on the outputs of future visioning. They are individual and collective aspirations, policy expectations, and co-mapping. This module is aimed to enable the participants to implement the TCDSE's approach and methods to deploy visioning scenario development in their city. Let's now discuss the specific objectives of the Module 2. The specific objectives of this module are to make participants able to comprehend how policies may impact future urban contexts, to make participants able to produce land use plans based on the input from future visioning activities, to make participants go through the data collection, production, and management process so that future exposure data sets are generated in a standardized way. Module 2 is a 9-hour course that contains 5 technical sessions, combining lectures with exercises to ease the participants in understanding these diverse topics. The sessions can be in person or online, spread out ideally across 2 days. We will now dive into what we learn in each of these sessions, which are broadly categorized into policy development, land use planning, exposure data generation, and validating visioning scenarios. Introduction to Visioning Scenario Development. In this session, participants will learn the basic terminologies of visioning scenario development, Introduction to TCDSE, Visioning Scenario Development background and approaches, and brief description on all the following sessions, that is, policy development, land use planning, data generation, and validating visioning scenarios. Policy development. In this session, participants are made able to comprehend how policies may impact future urban contexts. The objective of this session is to make participants able to analyze policies based on their relation to vulnerability and exposure, to make participants able to analyze policies based on their relation to existing policies, to make participants able to analyze policies based on the constraints, political, governance, physical, infrastructural, natural, and socio-economic factors, to make participants able to analyze policies based on equity concerns, and to familiarize participants with the ways of implementing policies. Exercise on policy development. This session assists participants in evaluating policy expectations, conducting a hands-on exercise to analyze these expectations or actions thoroughly. Land use planning. The objectives of this session are to make participants able to comprehend about the practical linkages between land use planning, disaster risk reduction, and the TCDSE. To make participants able to comprehend about diverse land use planning models. To make participants able to comprehend about urban development trends and drivers based on the land use change and urban growth. To guide participants in the preparation of disaster risk-sensitive land use plans that represent spatial expectations from diverse stakeholders with the help of real city cases. Exercise on land use planning. In this part, the participants learn to draw a basic land use plan with roads in the GIS interface. Exposure data generation. The overarching process incorporates the previously formulated land use plan as well as social and demographic data. These datasets are inputted into a data generation program where they undergo processing. The ultimate outputs from this process include the household layer, individual layer, and building layer. The land use plan combined with the future exposure data generates an exposure map. Exercise on exposure data generation. In this session, participants are allowed to go through a demo of how the overall data generation process works. Validating visioning scenarios. In this session, participants understand the logic behind validation process and become able to design a validation workshop that will be used in the revision of the visioning scenarios. This was all about what we learned in Module 2, with sessions on policy development, land use planning, and data generation that are used to generate the visioning scenarios. Thank you very much.